Fred Karger's with us. He's the first openly gay Republican presidential candidate. He has not held elected or public office, but he's worked on 9 presidential campaigns. He served as a senior consultant for President Ronald Reagan's campaign, George Bush #1, and Gerald Ford. Pleasure to speak with you, Fred.
Hey, David, nice to be on your show.
You know, on one hand, even being described as the first openly gay Republican candidate points to, I think, one of the main issues and main questions I have about an openly gay Republican candidate, which is that it is the party that inevitably has been known as the party that opposes marriage equality and gay rights. How and why did you even become part of the Republican Party, first of all? And how do you feel about the fact that it is the party associated with being against gay rights?
Well, you know, that's one of the principal reasons I'm running, because I do want to try and bring the Republican Party back to its roots. It was the party of Theodore Roosevelt who, very the first progressive Republican president. And, don't forget, we've gotten some good Republican votes, 8 in the U.S. Senate to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, 15 in the Congress. So there's hope within the Republican Party, and I'm not just the first openly gay Republican candidate. I'm the first openly gay candidate of a major political party in history, and my record on equality is better than President Obama's.
So when you see that one of your opponents, for example, is a partner in an anti-gay therapy clinic, something that's been widely debunked as completely bogus, of course, Michelle and Marcus Bachmann, and that there's many people in the Republican Party who support that. They believe anti-gay therapy is legitimate. How could you even be in the picture? In other words, how could a voter that considers that legitimate say, maybe I'll vote for Fred Karger instead? How could that even happen?
See, that's why I'm doing this. It's very important that the Republican Party not be completely lost to the far right, that those of us in the center continue to fight for our basic beliefs, like keeping government out of our lives. I've challenged Marcus Bachmann, Michelle's husband, we call him Lady Bird Bachmann, to a debate. I want to talk about his reverse gay therapy. I challenged him on that, as did Professor at Iowa State 2 weeks ago when I was at the Iowa State poll. We need to hold these people's feet to the fire, because they should not try and demonize gay people, and they should not try and use reverse therapy on Christian youth. It's highly dangerous. It's very suspect. He had 27 psychologists at his clinic, and I've called him out on it, and I will continue to.
No, of course we know that, but I'm just trying to see, you're for the government not being overly intrusive in people's lives, but where else do you agree with the Republican platform? In other words, what other areas of where else do you come together with the standard issues that Republicans would get behind?
Well, I believe in less government out of our lives. I believe in entrepreneurship, empowerment of people, personal responsibility, tough law and order. We've coddled criminals. We need to lock criminals up. I believe in a strong national defense. But then, I'm also caring. Government needs to have a role in caring for people that can't take care of themselves. But we can't have people reliant on government. And, that's why I still am in the Republican Party. And again, I want to bring it back to its roots. The party I grew up with, Dwight Eisenhower, even Richard Nixon, they were not these, social conservatives that were driving people out of the party. Numbers have shifted to the independent role. In New Hampshire, 42% of all voters are independent because they've left the Republican Party. I want to bring them back. I want to bring younger people into the party and the political process.
Yeah, I'm looking through some of your policy stances, and you want to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. You'd like to legalize and tax marijuana. However, on the issues where you are conservative, you match Republicans. So I don't understand in what way you stand out to a potential Republican voter. Independents, yes, I could see how some independents could get behind you. I find it difficult to believe they'd prefer you being a Republican than a Democrat or an independent. I just think that the pro-gay rights, anti-war, pro-marijuana wing of the Republican Party is pretty darn small.
You're absolutely right. And I can't argue with that, which is why I'm calling Fred Karger an independent Republican. Go to my website, fredkarger.com. Follow me on Twitter, @FredKarger. You'll see I'm a different kind of Republican. I'm like the Republican I grew up with, the Republican Party I grew up with, of Nelson Rockefeller. People who were not so hung up on the social issues and dividing our country. I was a maxed out donor to Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, which normally would have not enabled me to run for president this time. But the public is looking for someone who can get along with Democrats, who can get things done. As you mentioned, I worked for Ronald Reagan. He had that ability to do just that. When he was sworn in as president, one of the first things he did was invite Tip O'Neill, the liberal Democrat Speaker of the House from Massachusetts, to the White House. They forged a friendship. They got things done. They got along. And that's what I want to return this country to.
Yeah, but if the issue of equality and gay rights is as important to you as you've clearly demonstrated it is by looking at your career, couldn't you make a bigger impact by moving to the Democratic Party or by running as an actual independent and pointing out that there's an entire party, the Republican Party, that is simply not the place for gay rights and equality? Wouldn't you make a bigger impact that way than by struggling to, in some cases, not even get into some of the Republican debates as you're having so much trouble doing?
Well, change often comes from within. Certainly, a lot of the national and state and local LGBT organizations are led by Democrats. The members of the House are the 4 openly gay are all Democrats. We are pretty well covered on that base. Where we have our problems are within the Republican Party. So I want to be that elephant in the room. I want to be in. I'm now registering in the polls. The most recent Harris Interactive poll, I was at 2%. I was tied with Governors Pawlenty and Huntsman. I'm creeping up. A lot of progressives like me. They like my stands, in getting out of both wars. I'm often more progressive than President Obama. I certainly have more enthusiasm and optimism and hope in this country than he does. So, I think I'm a different kind of candidate. And, you can look at the party platforms and they do not define the Republican or Democratic Party. The candidates do, the leaders do, and I want to be this new kind of Republican.
Well, let me ask you this. If let's assume for a second that you are not the Republican nominee for president. I know it's hard to imagine. It's still a long time to go, but let's say that doesn't happen. Would you vote against your own interests? In other words, would you vote? You're really the only Republican right now who has your particular view on gay rights. If you are not the Republican nominee, will you vote for? Right now, none of the other Republican nominees support marriage equality and gay rights the way you do. Or would you vote for a Democrat instead?
Same thing goes for Obama. There's a new equality chart that came out. I'm at 100%. I'm the only full equality candidate running and the first openly gay candidate of a major party in history. Where's President Obama? He supported gay marriage in 1996. He's the first person I've ever heard of in America who's gone from supporting gay marriage to opposing it.
But would you vote? But the question. Let me restate the key part of that question. If you are not the Republican nominee, will you definitely vote for one of your fellow Republican contenders?
As you preface the question, David, I plan on being that Republican nominee. I've spent 19 months on this. I'm campaigning. If I get in a debate, that's my whole strategy, and I can catch on, then I could be that nominee.
All right. I would ask again, but I can tell I'm not going to get an answer. So Fred Karger, Republican presidential candidate, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks. I've enjoyed it. Happy Labor Day, everyone.